I believe God uses the same template to judge all nations, and that template can be understood by studying what God said would happen to Israel if that nation disobeyed God and rejected his precepts and principles. God always warns nations before he judges them, and in doing so, he gives them the chance to repent. However, if the nation does not repent, God's judgment becomes more severe. Note some of his warnings to Israel if they continued in the rebellion, and consider the self-evident comparisons to America today. Number 1 is Deuteronomy chapter 28. For disobeying God, Israel would be denied prosperity and abundance, both in regards to their economics as well as their agriculture. Deuteronomy 28 verse 24 describes drought. Many states in America are dealing with severe drought. Verse 28 describes confusion of heart. Americans are spiritually confused, mixing Christianity with pagan spirituality. Verse 29 tells that the nation shall not prosper in her ways. Look at the state of America's economy, educational, and legal systems. Verse 30 describes the loss of homes. Starting in 2008, America began experiencing historic levels of home foreclosures. Verse 38, you shall carry much seed out to the field, but gather little in. Recently, I watched a Fox News reporter standing on the side of a tractor as the farmer tilled his perfect crop of tomatoes back into the ground because it would cost him more to bring the crop to market than what he could sell it for. As a result, he was saving money by plowing under the crop. Watch and see if America's farmers experience poor yields or crops damaged through drought or storms. Verse 43 speaks of invasion of illegal aliens. One study reveals that illegal aliens cost Americans $346 billion per year. And then we turn to Leviticus 26, verse 16. I will even appoint terror over you. America lives under the threat and fear of terrorism constantly. Verse 19 of Leviticus 26, I will break the pride of your power. America's superpower status faces unprecedented challenges as our military is stretched thin around the world and overwhelming national debt sabotages our financial stability and dependability, prompting nations to call for a new reserve currency to replace the American dollar. Verse 20 and 26 speak of famine. Now, this is hard to imagine in America, but it's very possible. Verse 22, extreme economic distress. America is certifiably bankrupt. When you combine all of our off-record debt and unfunded liabilities like Medicare and Social Security, we are over $99 million in debt. The federal government could tax Americans 100% of their total incomes and not cover the federal deficit. Verse 31 of Leviticus 26 talks about invasion by enemies and destruction of cities. Intelligence officials and experts admit that terrorist sleeper cells are here in America and are simply waiting for orders to carry out acts of terrorism upon our cities, as those that did carry out the attacks on September 11th. For a nation in our condition, the New Testament is no more encouraging. Romans 1:21-32 clearly states that a nation that rejects God over and over will suffer 5 specific consequences, and America is experiencing all of these right now. Number 1, a nation of fools. Verse 21 and 22, those who reject God over and over become vain, useless, futile, or foolish in their thinking. Despite claiming to be so smart, people become so foolish in their thinking that they succumb to spiritual deception and accept spiritual lies and false teaching. Number 2, the nation accepts pagan spirituality. Verse 25, the Denver Post in June 2008 reported that pagan spirituality is doubling in America every 18 months. Pagan spirituality is the worship of nature, the belief in pantheism, which proclaims that God is all and all is God. Whether you call it cosmic humanism, the New Age movement, the new spirituality, or pagan spirituality, this is becoming the dominant worldview in America with the help of people like Oprah Winfrey and leaders of the emergent church. Number 3, the nation accepts homosexuality. Verse 26 and 27 of Romans chapter 1. States have approved homosexual marriage. The curriculum in many of America's public schools teaches the homosexual agenda. The non-judgmentalism of a postmodern generation dominates our thinking. New laws give special rights to homosexuals, and homosexuality becomes an ever more acceptable lifestyle to an ever-increasing percentage of Americans. Number 4, the nation becomes violent and debased. Verse 28 of Romans 1. Since the 1962 and 63 U.S. Supreme Court rulings outlawing prayer and Bible reading in America's public schools, our nation has seen a spike in the rates of murder, rape, child abuse, unwed pregnancies, and violent crimes. And lastly, number 5, the nation's leaders are corrupt and immoral. Verse 32 of Romans 1. It declares that when a nation continually rejects God, they will have leaders that are not only immoral and corrupt in their personal lives, but who also approve of and encourage immoral behavior in the people. Whether at the state or federal level, leaders in our legislative, judicial, and executive branches of government are continually passing laws, handing down legal rulings, signing executive orders, and sponsoring legislation against the righteous judgments of God. And finally, a quick look at Isaiah chapter 5 deepens the sense of consequences that await the unrepentant and the continual sins for which God will bring judgment on a nation. God warned Israel for these sins, and America should also consider itself warned. Isaiah 5 talk about materialism. Money is not the root of all evil, but the love of money is. Love of money lies at the heart of materialism. Materialism is a form of idolatry, the devotion to money that also includes knowingly disobeying God's principles and standards in order to obtain money. Isaiah 5 verses 11 through 12 talks about hedonism. Hedonism says that the purpose of life is not to seek God, but to seek pleasure. It rejects the absolute truth of right and wrong based on the character and nature of God. Instead, proclaims if it feels good, do it. You only live once, or eat, drink, and marry, for tomorrow we die. Verse 12 also talks about apathy and foolishness. Ideas have consequences, and bad ideas have bad consequences. Apathy has led Americans to take their freedoms for granted, to become intellectually lazy, to reject reason, logic, and context. The Bible speaks repeatedly about the need to acquire knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Yet Americans have done the exact opposite and reject knowledge. Knowledge is the acquisition of truth, and wisdom is the application of truth. According to the Bible, Jesus Christ is truth. His word is truth. And yet Americans have developed apathy toward God that is now turned into disdain toward his character and nature. Verse 20 of Isaiah chapter 5 talks about moral relativism. Since the late 60s, millions of American public school children have been educated with values clarification courses that proclaim moral relativism, the notion that all values and beliefs are equal, because there is no absolute truth or standard of right and wrong. Verse 21 talks about arrogance leading to spiritual deception. People become so arrogant and foolish in their thinking that they accept lies such as pagan spirituality. And verses 21 through 23 of Isaiah 5 talks about corrupt leadership and rulers drunk with power and enriching themselves with bribes and ill-gotten gains. Examples of this are everywhere. Americans are realizing that the majority of our local, state, and federal leaders are interested only in power and in using their positions to enrich themselves. So, what's a Christian to do? Christians must occupy till the Lord returns. As America goes under, Christians who are committed only to the reconstruction of America or building a Christian America will retreat from the culture. If indeed God is judging America, as I believe He is, and if judgment is going to greatly increase, as I believe it will, then we need to use His judgment as an opportunity to preach the gospel to the unsaved. God's national judgment can allow us to speak in the natural realm and then shift to the spiritual. Explain to the unbeliever what sin is, why God must judge sin, and that the judgment nations experience in this life is nothing compared to the eternal judgment individuals will receive in the next world. We can share with them that grace and mercy are only extended to those who repent, that Jesus Christ has provided the way for us to pass from judgment into life. Maranatha.